webinar, we'll explore first one, insights into how one can look at time and energy creatively. Second, tools to build on reflective time for yourself. Third, ways to create what your day can look like and live it by building habits. These are the three key things that we're going to explore in this webinar. And now let me introduce the speaker for today. A sociologist and journalist by qualification, Nisha Subramaniam is passionate about the power of written word. A transformative experience, fellowship experience pushed Nisha to imagine what if every child in India had the power to reimagine his or her destiny. Currently, as a co-founder of Kanavu, which means dreams, Nisha leads efforts in education and community development by nurturing leadership in disadvantaged schools and communities to fight inequity. That brings us to the norms for the webinar today. Given the large audience that we are expecting today, please keep your video and mic off to reduce stress on the bandwidth. Unmute it only when our speaker asks you to do so. Second, you can keep typing your questions in the chat box during the session. I will try, and the presenter here will address all the questions. We'll try to address as much questions as possible. I'll curate all the questions and we'll be asking these questions to our speaker today. At the end, we also have specific time for asking questions. Also, please remember that learning new things is often difficult, but challenge yourself and reflect on your thinking and experiences today. Best way to remember something is to write or discuss your learning with someone after the webinar. This webinar will also be recorded and will be available on YouTube and Firki website very soon. We also have Anu from our team who will be taking down notes for the session, a summary of which will be available along with the recording and other resources of the webinar. So that brings me to the end of my introduction. Just before we go ahead with the webinar at hand today and I hand over the space to Nisha, let's do a quick opening activity. For this, what we are going to do is, one of our team members will, you can individually unmute yourself and then you have to just say hello in your mother tongue. So it can be namaste, namaskaram or vanakkam. It can be anything in your mother tongue. Just say hello. We're not saying our name, just the word hello. Okay. On a count of 3, all of us will unmute ourselves and just say that. Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Hello.
Namaste.
Namaskar.
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 Hello.
Assalamualaikum.
What are you trying to do? Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Perfect. That was lots of voices in different languages. It clearly shows the variety and the diversity that we have in this team. Thank you so much for doing that. Now, I hand over the space to our speaker, Nisha. Nisha, over to you.
Thank you so much. Is my screen sharing enabled?
Yes, it has been.
Yeah. Can someone just help me if my screen sharing is enabled?
Yes, Nisha, it has been. Can you please try? Just use the option share screen.
Yeah, we can see the screen now.
All right, great. Thank you. And good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you, Elizabeth, for a very happy and a kind introduction of myself and the work that a small team of 4 of us are trying to do in Cuddalore. So without much ado, we'll get started right away. Get started with one of my most favorite slides. This slide captures a gist of the number of wonderful people I've worked with over this past decade. I started my work with children in 2010. I was a Teach for India fellow myself. I taught in Bombay for 2 years. So starting from there, and I moved to Teach for India Chennai, worked with adults, fellows, program managers, have had an opportunity to work very close with over 100 fellows and program managers over my years at Teach for India. And currently at Kanavu, we are a small setup where it's an entrepreneurial venture in education and community development. We lead 5 schools here. And I also co-lead a rural entrepreneurial venture called Sura, where a group of mothers from the community have come together to stitch cotton bags and lifestyle products. But through all of this, I think the past 10 years has been a lot with working with different people for a variety of goals. Currently, I work with some women who want to stitch bags and make a living out of that, or teachers who want to be giving their best in classrooms every day, or fellows who want to make the most out of their 2 years, or just people who want to work on just being better themselves, their personal leadership. Through all of those all of these 10 years, I think just one sort of really big learning for me has just been this. It's just how when people start to spend their time differently, that's sort of almost the beginning point of change, of transformation. I think a whole lot of us here are teachers, and it's very exciting to think about how children spend time in a classroom. And we know that the more exciting things children do in a classroom, then there's a lot of learning happening. And I think very similarly, I've seen over the years that whether it's a child or whether it's a teacher or whether it's a HM who I'm currently working with, when we are able to really sort of view our time differently and spend our time in a different way, something really magical starts to happen. And this belief is what really brings me to spend the next sort of 85, 90 minutes with all of us together to explore how do we manage our time and self better. A little bit more about sort of why I'm doing this. This picture captures the way I spend my time. I was trying to do it in one frame. I think for me, thinking a lot about how I spend my time is just with all the different elements and people here. I'm a mother. I raise a 3-year-old dog and a 3-year-old daughter. And I think they've taught me so much about time management and productivity, and some of which we're going to talk a little bit more about. I value my time with my people, friends and family, always try and see how I can balance between the work that I do and being there for my family and friends. The picture right here on the left is at a training day. I absolutely love the kind of work that we get to do with our stakeholders here, spend a lot of time with people here, and it's a new sort of a venture that we are starting, and that takes up quite a bit of my time. I also have a bit of interest into arts, and I want to keep up different kinds of hobbies, and also like to spend my time in a day taking care of my physical well-being. So it's a little bit of exercise or walking. And so I think through all of this, one very common thing for me is just like a struggle. So when I saw all of your responses, a lot of questions were around how to manage time. How do we not feel like I'm doing one thing after the other always? A lot of questions was just around the idea of how can I look at time differently? And I think for me, this was exciting to put this presentation together, because I think the one common thing in all of this is just struggle. It is a struggle to manage time effectively, but I also think it's very exciting, and which is why when I thought about what should be the title of this webinar, I think 2 sort of really important words for me were creative and fun. So while we're going to talk about different things today, I think the 2 big words for me are, is this creative? Is this exciting for you? Is this making you look at your time and your day differently? And is this fun? Like, are you having fun managing yourself and time? Is this working for you? We'll talk a lot more about this over the next sort of an hour together. But just as a big idea, I think for me, I have a lot of fun managing time. While it may not look like fun all the time, I may not look like I'm laughing and happy about it. I think I have my fair share of low days, fair share of just really frustrated that everything is taking a lot of time. I am really struggling. I have to now figure out a new system. But I think I always get back to it because it's a lot of fun. And I think this has helped me really learn a lot about myself. So just as we jump in, I would love for all of us to be using our chat window use it to share thoughts, feedback, questions. We'll try and answer as many through this time together. And we will also have the questions that you've shared at the start of this webinar has also been very useful for me to put together some thoughts. And I hope we're all like able to learn something and get something out of this time together. Yeah, so we'll get started. So we're going to broadly look at 6 different concepts, bubbles or thought clouds today. And that's going to, just these 6 big ideas have really helped me think a lot about what my time can look like and how am I creatively playing around with time. And so just keep these 6 things in mind. We're going to come back to these 6 sort of different thoughts or cloud ideas throughout the presentation. Okay, so we'll get started with the first one. We're going to do a quick poll. Prerna, will you help me with this? Okay, so the poll is up here.
Hi everyone, you can see a question on the sheet on your screen. Please answer.
I by mistake clicked on the wrong option. What do I do?
You can quickly type in the chat box. It's okay. Just quickly type in the chat box your response. We have around 160 response now.
Question was unfair because there was no gray area. So you were in neither sometimes.
Okay, that's a great thought. So we'll hold on to the thought. I'm going to wait for 30 more seconds for everybody to quickly punch in your view. You have a lot of time to do what you want to do. And I think try and think about a general time, not just now in quarantine and lockdown. I acknowledge each one of us at a very different place because the world is at a very different place. So just generally, what's the feeling that you have a lot of times? Do you feel like I have a lot of time, or do you feel like, I read in the response, somebody had written, I'm always feeling like I'm running to catch a train. So it's always feeling like you're in a hurry.
We have around 180 responses now.
All right. So thank you everybody for voting in. I also see some comments about time, energy, and I think the clear winner is not having time to do what I want to do. And let's just hold on to that thought. I also see some comments about how there's no energy, I have time. And again, the world is such a different place right now where we are all trying to grapple with possibly more time at home, but also increased house chores. And then the concept of time and energy becomes something very interesting for us to explore. Just love this comic about just the notion of time, and we don't have time, and just thinking about it's very similar to the poll that all of us shared right now. Very often I feel like, oh, I don't have time, but I always check myself to think about, am I really talking about time when I say I don't have time, or is it sometimes I don't have the energy? I saw someone in the chat window share the article about manage time, not energy. It's a very famous HBR article. It's a very good read. And I think through my journey, I think something I've discovered, for a little while, I thought a lot about I have to manage time. And slowly I moved to saying, no, I don't have to manage time. I actually have to manage energy. And then I figured that I have to manage my time and energy. But I think my biggest learning in this journey for me is I'll have to create time and energy. While I know finite, like time is only 24 hours a day or X number of hours a week, I think just me working with a perspective and that ownership that the time is mine and it's up to me to create time and energy has drastically, has really shifted things for how I look at my time. And even through lockdown, that things are very different for us at our work front as well. I think just carrying that notion of I am creating my time and I am creating energy for me to either do something or also create energy for me to rest and say, I'm going to go take it slow. and just sharing with you some things that really helped me. And I would really encourage you to sort of start off an activity for yourself, trying to answer these questions for yourself. You've been encouraged to carry a paper and pens, even if you want to just note down these questions or take a screenshot of this, and spending some time answering this for yourself will provide a lot of clarity about where do you want to be really investing your time and energy. Thinking a lot about who gives or drains my energy. And again, it's not such a bad thing. I think a lot of times I feel like my daughter drains my energy, and doesn't mean I love her any less or I don't enjoy spending time with her. But I also want to acknowledge that there is mostly she gives me a lot of energy, but there are times when she's really draining my energy. And that awareness really helps me to stop and say, okay, I need to do something different. So I'm able to get back to her with some more energy. Thinking about what activities gives or drains energy. And again, something physically, something like walking or running physically, which technically drains physical energy, can actually leave you with a lot of mental energy. So again, spending some time over the next few days, really helping yourself go through the next few days with awareness and thinking about, hey, what is it that gives me energy? What is it that's draining energy? A really interesting exercise I would encourage all of you all to do independently is what's my energy graph? Over the next few days, if you had to plot time and energy and say from morning till night, when is my energy really high? When is my energy really low? What are the different things that's influencing my energy? And again, for some of us, it could be physical energy. For some of us, it could be mental energy. For me, I know that even if I'm really tired, just making time to speak to somebody, like a friend of mine, or listening to music or dancing or going for a walk gives me a lot of energy to come back to my day feeling better. And I think the fourth activity that I would recommend for you to do by yourself is creating a pie chart of how you spend your time. So if you have to draw an entire circle and put down a pie chart of what percentage of your time do you spend sleeping, what percentage of your time are you investing in work, what percentage of time is invested in family, and again, what goes into the pie depends on what's important for you. But at the end of this sort of activity, you're going to have two lists and two graphs. So one list is going to tell you what is giving you and draining you energy. The other is what activities, who are the people, and then what is my energy graph and what's your time pie. Now this gives you a ton of information for you to think creatively about, start to think creatively about your day. So if I know that just getting some alone time in the morning for me gives me a lot of energy, I prioritize waking up early. Even if I'm really sleepy, I know that I'm going to get a quick 20-minute nap in the afternoon, but I'm definitely going to be up by 5:30 because that gives me a lot of energy. I need that morning time of just like 45 minutes when nobody else is awake for me to start my morning well. That really helps me. So that's how I figured what my energy graph is. Over a period of time, I figured that by 4:35, I feel a little tired in the evening. So 4:35 is always a time where I plan to do something fun, or I plan to get a cup of coffee. So just that awareness, while initially it may seem like, oh, I have to think so much. But over a period of time, this becomes sort of, it becomes like a lot of helpful information. And again, for a lot of us here who are teachers, this is how we act with our children, right? We're constantly looking at who's having the energy, who's getting distracted, how can we help this child pay attention? And if we worked with ourselves in that lens, you're going to get a lot of information about your time and energy. So that's about time and energy, which is the first concept. And I'm leaving you with 4 questions for you to think for yourself. And this is going to help you plan your day. And we're going to see how the rest of the 5 pieces is going to fall in place. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to quickly go to the chat box and just put in any comments and thoughts. So that before we move on to the second thing, we are done with the first part. So it'd be really helpful if you're on mute and continue to keep adding your thoughts on the chat box.
So we have people saying morning, they're full of energy and they really like the morning me time. It's very helpful to start the day. Musharatu was saying
physical exercise.
Yeah, family members give energy.
Yeah.
Constant calls drain energy. Yeah, totally relate to that.
Yeah. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about what are some things we can do for low energy times. Yeah, absolutely. Our
Pets
dog is
give
such a
energy.
big source of energy for us. Yeah. And I think dogs are really great because when you see they're tired, they absolutely take that rest. Like my dog, if he's tired, he will not move. Absolutely. Even if we are showing him his biscuit, he wouldn't move. And when he's full of energy, he moves. Whereas I think humans, irrespective of how I feel, we push ourselves to do something, which gets really difficult over a period of time. Great. Thank you so much for all of this energy. It's certainly giving me a lot of energy. Move on to the second sort of a big thought bubble, which is change. A lot of us, when a lot of questions that even all of you all had posted in the form that you had filled was a lot about how can I change some habits? What do I have to do differently? And this has been a question on our minds for the past 2 months where everything about the world has changed. And we are all having to build new habits to cope. And I love both of these Calvin and Hobbes comics where it talks about how change is incremental. Like every day, it doesn't seem like anything is very different, but suddenly something is very different. And also the other beautiful thing about it, change happens anyway. So even if some of us here are feeling like I have the energy, I have the time, but I'm not doing anything, but actually you're not the same person that you are when even say April when lockdown started. So whether we like it or not, change is happening. So how do we again creatively make that change work for us is something we're going to think about and explore. So when we often think about change, people think about I hear, and I also do this very often, and with the people I work with, we think about change at a very feeling level. We say, I want to be a disciplined person. I want to be a consistent person. I want to feel happy. And then we often are feeling frustrated because it's not happening. I'm not able to do this. I think a really big lesson I've learned from some amazing coaches I've worked with is, can I really very deeply describe the change that I want to happen? And I'm going to give you the next 30 seconds to quickly write this down for yourself. I assume all of you all are here on this webinar because you want to be changing something about how you're thinking about your time or how you're using your time. So can we put down what the change is? So if you have to say, I want to describe myself as dash, if I can do dash, 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 which can be the activities. To do this, I need dash. It could be a value, it could be a resource, it could be even something like to do this, I need company. I want to start exercising, and to do this, I need company. And when I'm stuck, I'm going to do this. Okay, so I'm just going to request, again, if somebody's comfortable, you can put it on the chat window. But if you can think about what is the change that you want. So you want to describe yourself as this kind of a person by doing these things. And to do this, you need to do this. Okay? I'm going to look forward to some responses on the chat box. What is something you want to change about the way you're spending your time? Okay, it could be, you may want to describe yourself as a very calm person. You may want to describe yourself as a very consistent person. So what is it that you want to be changing about the way, and hence, how do you want to be describing yourself? So it can be, I want to be a very planned person. Okay, so maybe I'll jump into my example. Okay, this is my example, and this is a real example for me. I think I'm a very impulsive person. I'm a very creative person, and hence I'm a very impulsive person. So I wanted to be able to describe myself as disciplined. And for many, many months, I was constantly telling myself, oh, you're not disciplined, you're not disciplined. And this is why some of these things are not happening. But when I really sat down to say, okay, I want to be disciplined, what are actions that will happen if I become disciplined? So I really narrowed down to say 3 things. I say I wanted to read every day. I wanted to exercise every day. And I want to get to a place where I can say no to sugar in my coffee. Almost these were things, and these things I thought to myself, what's really frustrating me? Where is that need for change coming from? And then I really put down, like, what do I need for this to happen? And at this time, I'm thinking about barriers. I'm thinking about things like, if my shoes and socks is not ready, then that becomes an excuse for not exercising. If I'm really thinking about what to read, I'm not reading. And in first thing in the morning, I don't have the willpower to say no to sugar when I see sugar there. So can I just put sugar off the counter? So I really put down specific actions or specific resources that is going to really help me to do this. And then a big thing I realized is I'm getting stuck because I'm trying a new change. And I'm used to sugar in my coffee. I'm used to not exercising. I'm used to not reading. So how am I going to really help? And then I put down that, okay, two things. One, I'm going to write this and put it up as a poster. And the other is I'm going to get somebody to remind me that I want to be doing this. And this has really helped me. And I'm sharing this as a tool for you to be thinking about the change in the form of actions and specific actions of here are the three things you want to see yourself do. And to do this, I need to be doing this. So I saw an example of being self-aware. And if in the paradigm of managing time, I think probably self-aware can look like when I can articulate how I'm feeling, when I can articulate how I'm spending my time. To do this, possibly someone needs to maintain a journal. When I'm stuck, it can also sometimes when I'm stuck, it can also be I'm going to remind myself to start again. Like when I used to be this person where if I sort of didn't exercise until Wednesday, I'll tell myself it's okay, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I don't have to exercise and I'll start again from Monday. But it's really helped me to remind myself not to put that away and to say, I'm going to start. No matter what, I'm still going to go ahead and start. And that's helped me think a lot creatively about how I'm managing my time. So that's a little bit about knowing the change that you want to make. And I think a great question that a lot of teachers have also asked me is, okay, now I understand the change that I want to make. How do I sort of sustain the change? And a really useful question that you can ask yourself in this regard is, what's my unit of change? Do I want to be planning ahead for a month, for a week, for a day? And I think that's really where I was sharing about how self-awareness is helpful. Just thinking for yourself, do you want to be thinking about change as I'm going to plan the entire month, I'm going to plan the entire week, I'm going to plan my entire day, whatever is your unit of change. And then some of these challenges are helpful to say, 30 days, I'm going to be without sugar. 30 days, I'm going to pick up a word and I'm going to create some piece of art with it. Just helping yourself stick to that change by deciding a unit of time is very helpful. Sometimes it can be very scary for us to think, oh, for the rest of my life, I'm committing to exercising. Whereas saying, I want to, for the next 15 days, I want to be exercising. For the next 10 days, I want to be exercising. So all of these are sort of useful ways for us to be thinking about change. And the picture I'm sharing here is from my journal. I maintain like a bullet journal. It's just like an empty notebook, I enjoy art. So I ensure that I'm creating some art with it. The way I plan for my time is I think about in a month, what's that month calendar looking like? And again, what is the change that I want to see in myself in June? And for me, I like putting out a monthly overview of saying in a month, here are some of the things I really want to do. And these are not always like work goals. It can also be, I want to try a new recipe. I want to be trying a new form of exercise. I want to be watching 2 movies. And it really helps for me to just have it out here. It's almost like a wish list of sorts, but it's put out in a monthly calendar. And then I break my months down into weeks as well. So if you see the bottom part of the picture, that's every week has 2 pages where I'm trying to write down what do I want to do that day and what am I getting out of that day. And this has been really helpful for me to think about. It's not like once in a few days, something is triggering that I should have had sugar-free coffee and I'm feeling very frustrated about myself. So it really helps me manage my moods, which some of you all were asking, how can I manage my stress? I think for me, this has been very helpful to see that here are the things I want to be doing. Here are the reasons why it's happening, why it's not happening. As I'm planning for my month and planning for things I want to change, I also make sure every week has things that gives me energy. Every week has, or every month, there are some exciting things for me to look forward to. That really helps me keep my eyes on what I want to be changing. All right. That brings us to the end of sort of the second big thought. And with that, we move to tasks. Managing tasks is task is any activity or any small unit of work. And some of you all, or many of you may be familiar with this whole not urgent, important, not important, delegation and elimination framework. And again, at the end of this, I will share resources. Some of these are things you can read off the internet. Some things that has been useful for me is thinking about sorting out my tasks. So I started by making a really big bucket list of what are all the different things I have to get done in a day, in a week. And this was over work as well. This was at home. And I tried to list down what are my repetitive tasks. So currently, even in lockdown, some of the tasks are repetitive. So I'm saying here are all the house chores that I have to do. Here are all some of the calls to our stakeholders that I have to do. So I try and write down what are some things I need to be doing every day. What is a one-off task? So this week, for example, preparing for this webinar was a one-off task. So just knowing that here's a list of repetitive tasks I have to do every day. There are some tasks I have to do every once a week, once a month. So making that big list of here are all the things I need to be doing and try and putting it into an order has just been really helpful for me. And not just tasks, I think putting tasks into categories has really helped me to see if my day and my week or my month has a balance of the different things that I value. So some weeks, I think by the nature of how things are, like maybe very work heavy. There could be some big deadlines, things that I don't have control over. And maybe that's a week where I'm saying, I'm not going to try and do much of other house operation works that is there. And I'm going to focus a lot more on this. But whereas I'm going to come back and create a sense of balance, I think over a period of time, like I've been doing this for say 3-4 years now. And I think over a period of time, I know, even without writing, I know like here's all the list of the tasks. These are helpful for me to understand what am I pushing away. So this week, if I'm going to be really busy doing something, I'm going to push this to another week, and just making those decisions becomes very easy. So for tasks, the question I'm going to leave you with is, can you make a big list of tasks all the tasks that you have to do, including things like laundry, washing dishes, to house chores, to sending emails. And then if you have to divide it up and say, what are all the tasks that comes into which categories? That's a really great starting point for you to understand where are you spending your time. I saw a lot of questions about to-do lists, and it's something I love talking about. And we're going to take the next few minutes to think a little bit more about tasks themselves. I'll share some of my learning about tackling tasks. I think the first thing that's really helped me is to stop doing to-do list, but I do my to-do list into buckets. So I try and not just make one big list about everything that I have to do, but I look at it as my current buckets are work, home, babies, and reading, self-development. And then I just divide up my page into these columns, and then I keep writing my to-do list under each one of this. Again, it's really helpful for me to see which are the things that are getting done. So typically my work to-do list get done. Things to do with my children, it gets done. But I often see that I compromise on my reading time, or I compromise on my exercise time. Just being more aware of what are the things that I'm getting done, what are the things that I'm not getting done. Over a period of time, even at work, there are some things that don't get done. Over a period of time, that's still pending. Then it's a useful point of reflection to go back and see, why am I not getting this done? That's one thing. I think the second, shown by this beautiful interconnected picture, I've realized that you need to have a system for to-dos and not just making a list. A list alone is not going to be helpful. You need to have a system. And I'll give you an example. By a system, I mean, are you going to be using your computer for writing your to-dos? Is it your phone? Is it a notebook? Is it a piece of paper? And for me, I carry, at the end of every week, either a Sunday morning or a Monday morning, I carry forward leftover to-dos from last week to the next week. That's an example of a system where I've created a process for my to-do list. And it's not a one-off list that I'm making. And I think the third thing is we all often, people who make lists often have a to-do list, but often we sit with that to-do list and keep wondering, what do I start with? Which one do I do first? How do I get to this? And that's when I realized that my to-do list should actually have when, how, etc. should be written in the to-do list itself. So looking at time as blocks. So within my to-do list, my rows are morning and evening and night. So I divide up the tasks that I have to do as I just know that in the morning I need to get these 3 done. So I'm not really thinking about what the order and priority when I'm sitting and looking at my list. So sort of organizing the to-do list and in a way that is giving you information about when you're going to do it, how you're going to do it. And that's really helped me plan for my time better. So especially for a lot of you all had said there are a lot of calls happening, a lot of webinars happening. How do I plan my time? I think those are things that's already fixed for you. You know that 3 o'clock this is happening, 4 o'clock that's happening. So in my to-do itself, I would write down the time. And I know that for that time, I need to be in a quiet room with internet bandwidth, etc. So it gives you a lot more information than just a list of tasks. And the last picture, it's a recent favorite of ours. We use this in our team. It's what we call mega to-dos. So it's a little bit like we all have action items in our head and then we're constantly thinking, I need to do this, I need to do that. So imagine that to be like your syntax tank. And you just keep dumping every single to-do that comes into your head into that. But whereas you spend some time sorting it out, just like how the water is coming out through different taps, you sort it out maybe once a week, you sit down and keep sorting your to-dos into different categories. When I'm sitting down to work, sometimes I'm thinking about, oh, this week, my dog is due for his vaccination. At the same time, I'm still thinking about, oh, I'll have to call that vendor to deliver the zips for our bags. So what really helped me is to just have a notebook where I'm writing all of this down. But end of the week, I'm sitting down to say, okay, the dog's vaccination goes into my personal to-dos, whereas the zip order is going into my rural entrepreneur venture to-dos. So just having one bunch of mega to-dos has really helped me to not drop things. And that's been really helpful. And a big learning for me has been that this entire system has to be holistic. It's been very difficult for me at times when I used to do all of this for work, but nothing for home or for my life. And then I was realizing I was very efficient and productive at work, but extremely inefficient. And my friends and family were joking about how I wouldn't keep up their commitments. I wasn't spending enough time with them. And then I figured I need to do this holistically. I need to also have a system for different commitments in my life as well. And then a similar system is just really helpful to tackle different tasks that come up. So all of this is very holistic for me, that all of these sort of ways of working and managing time is also how, let's say we run our kitchen at home to different house tasks that has to be done. That's really helped maintain a sense of harmony between house and work. And now I know a lot of people with lockdown are feeling like there's so much work, but there's also so much housework. And largely for me, I feel like the change has not been so drastic because I have a system for figuring out house operations and work as well. And that's been really helpful for me. I think two big other things for you to think about is resources for the different tasks. I think once you've identified what your tasks are, just thinking about, are your resources available? That takes up a lot of mental bandwidth for us to be planning for our resources. So the top left picture is a picture of me when I'm finished organizing our kitchen in such a way that all the dabbas had labels and everything was labeled. And I think just it really helped us to ensure that the house was well stocked. And at the time of cooking, I'm not finding out that I don't have something. Similarly, I think the bottom picture is my table. I really like starting my day with my table filled with everything that I need for the day. So you can see there's a folder with some papers. There's the yarn and the crochet and my paint brush. And I just know that that day I want to get all of these things done. I'm putting out my resources so that when I know between 3 to 4, I'm going to be doing painting, I don't spend time between 3 and 3:15 searching for my paint box and brushes. And then that motivation is already gone. So just as you're planning your week, again, I'll tie this back to week planning, where it's really been helpful for me to know here are some things I want to do this week, and hence the resources for it is available. I think just the last thing with respect to tasks is thinking about who your ecosystem is, which is your immediate family, your friends, and getting them to support you. Thinking about what are some tasks you can all do together. What are some tasks you'll have to delegate, particularly like house chores, house operations, thinking about, am I able to invest everybody in some systems that's really helping everybody stay on track? And I would tie this back idea to time versus energy. Thinking a lot about some of these gives you a lot of energy. To give you an example, doing that knitting or crochet, like even a 10-minute between two meetings gives me a lot of energy, but I can do it in 10 minutes only if I have the material available on my table. Otherwise, like between a 3 o'clock and a 3:30 meeting, I will spend 15 minutes searching for where my yarn is, where my needle is, and I'm not going to be doing something that's giving me energy. So I would urge you to think a little bit about what are your tasks, do you have all the resources for it, and do you have an ecosystem that supports you through it. This is an example of processes and systems that we have at home. So this is a list of like master grocery list, and as and when things run out, we just keep changing it to a 0. And so anybody who's out, we live and work in a village here. So we'll have to move out to the town to procure items. And just a simple system has been very helpful for everybody to know that here are some grocery items that's not available. So we just have to pick it up on our way back. And this has really helped each one of us to clear off that task of having to go and buy, because then the list is common and it's available for everybody. This is an example of a system that's really worked for me for about, I think for about 7-8 years now. I start every week out by making a list, by making a menu of what's going to be cooked. And what you see on the first column is just the different chores that are there, like from sweeping, swabbing the kitchen to sweeping, swabbing the rooms, cleaning the table, putting milk away. So just like doing this has really helped. And currently we're a team of 4 of us. We live together as well. So this has been a very useful system for us to have everybody take ownership of different tasks that's available. And it also involves my ecosystem. And over a period of time, it saves me a lot of time, because every day I'm not thinking about what am I cooking today? What am I stocking up today? And again, during these quarantine times, this was really helpful, because we were always used to a system where we were planning for a week ahead and we knew what had to be stocked up. But really, I think a crucial thing about tasks is thinking about what's going to be helpful. Yeah, I think just a great question about supervising and just delegating versus supervising. I think a lot about is everybody invested in the task. If everybody can see that this is saving our time, then the supervising comes down. I've also seen this work very well in a team where we're looking at, let's divide different parts of the meeting. Let's have different team members own different parts of the meeting and let them come and plan for it. I think a very similar system of saying, I don't want to be taking up the task of planning for the entire meeting, but I'm going to have different team members own it. I think when you do it for one area of your life, it becomes so much easier to do it in the other area of your life. And when the people around you are invested, I think the supervising time comes down, is sort of a thought. Okay, the fourth thing we are going to move into is just the idea of day as a pie. We did this a little earlier where I was asking you to think about in the time versus energy. I was asking you to think about divide your day into how you spend your time, what gives you energy. Something that was very useful for me in my initial few days and months of trying to figure out different routines was drawing out a pie chart of how I want to be spending my time in a day. Just in thinking about how many hours for the 24 hours, how many hours do you want to be doing what? This has helped me manage change in my routines as well. So for a lot of you all who are thinking how to manage time during this lockdown, or like some of you all were saying, you now have to do online teaching. So every time I've had a new change in my schedule, I try and redraw my pie. So when the responsibility of taking care of my daughter came up, And again, it was really very different. I suddenly only had 4 hours of sleep. And then I had like so many more hours of having to take care of a child. So just doing the exercise of constantly saying, I'm going to redraw my pie. And again, try and think about how do I want to be spending my time on what? And it's never a one-time process. It's a continual process. Every time there's a new challenge. Like in the past few months, obviously, I've not been on school visits. I've not met any stakeholder. So just doing this pie chart and figuring out, okay, in this time, what am I doing with the time that's available for me? That's been a really helpful strategy. And again, this helps you create like how you want to be spending your time and how you want to be managing change that comes your way. All right. I'm just going to pause here to take some questions or thoughts. Would really encourage for you to add it in the chat box if you had any questions.
We've added some questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are some questions. One way that's asked, if you can, like the slide of the grocery system inventory, can you share how you make that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I also saw, when do you set up your resources?
Yeah, resources. Yeah, that was the next question from Ved.
Great. So when do I set up my resources? I'll definitely share a little bit about that in a bit.
Okay.
I also saw such a high level of organization, and I want to say this is never like I sat on one day and this came up. This is a very continual system, and it's been a lot of changes, and we continue to make changes. Like I said, currently we used to have an auntie who used to come in and help us with washing the dishes. But now as a home, we're 4 of us, and we have to share that, and that's changed the system that we have. So what this has allowed me to do is to keep changing when things happen. As for when we make these resources, I think for me, like I shared earlier, unit time for me is a month. I like to think ahead for a month. Very broadly, I like to think about, okay, in this month, what are my travel days? What are my really big commitments? What is going to be taking up a lot of time? What are some exciting things? What is a new habit I want to pick up? And then I also sit to think about these things, reflect about these things once a week. I try and do it every Monday. As for some of the groceries and meal planning systems, again, it's a system that's been set up. I update it once a week. And that's sort of been something that's been very helpful for me. Yeah.
There's another question.
About how we made that. We just like made a list of everything that's available at home. And over a period of time, again, we figured what do we need more, what do we need less? And can we just like make a list of it? And as and when something got over, we would, it was again a behavior change. We had to commit to go and put a 0 there. And then, so a person who's going out will just like look at what all is a 0 and buy that and restock. Yeah.
There's one question.
Yeah.
Do you use any particular app to manage this, or do you make a note of it in your journal, especially the pie?
Yeah. So I think that I was coming to that a little bit later is I think I'm not much of a tech person. I've tried a bunch of apps. The only app that I use is the Nike Run Club. It really helps me to stick to my walking and my exercise routine. And it has a very fantastic way of tracking your statistics. But I find apps fairly distracting. I think it makes me do more screen time. I'm a very paper pen person, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in habit as well. I think it's really helpful for you to find what works for you. For me, because I like art and I enjoy painting and doodling and things like that, all of this is an opportunity for me to doodle or paint, and hence I do all of this in my journal. Yeah.
It's one interesting question. So after planning so much, there is a tendency to get upset if something doesn't work. I can just relate it totally to that.
Yeah.
So how do you go about that?
I think, I really think the planning prepares me to be very flexible when something doesn't happen. So when something doesn't happen, I almost feel like in my head, everything is like Lego blocks. When something doesn't happen, I know exactly what I have to pick and what I have to place where. So it's not very difficult. I do think sometimes if I'm emotionally invested in some things, maybe I feel bad, maybe. But I think I always know how else this can happen. And I think over a period of time, it's just, I've had this, like trying an app has been very disastrous. Went through an entire month saying, okay, the entire world is going through technology, so I'm also going to not do paper and pen. I'm going to do everything on my phone. And I was so frustrated that month because I just kept feeling like this wasn't working for me. So over a period of time, you get to a place where planning provides you flexibility. Like planning is the only, I think the reason why I plan is not for everything to happen accordingly, but for me to say when things don't go according to a plan, then you know what you have to do. And I think just having a child at home teaches you a big lesson on that. There's no 2 hours that are the same. There's no 2 days that are the same. So I may wake up that morning feeling like here is all the thing I'm going to get done. And just as my daughter may decide that today she's not going to have an independent day, she's going to decide that today I have to be spending that time with her. It gives me a lot of, while definitely it's frustrating. I'm not like sitting there and smiling and saying, oh, I have a plan, so I'm very happy and calm with you. While sometimes it's frustrating, but I think at the back of my head, I know that, okay, this means that in the evening, I'm not going to do this thing and I'm just going to finish up this work in a couple of hours. Or it helps me to already call somebody and cancel a commitment. I'm saying, hey, you know what? I actually can't turn this in by this week because this has happened. Or the meal plan is really helpful. Sometimes I'm just like, tonight is just bread and sandwich, or just idli and chutney, because like just the morning has entirely gone off with my daughter doing. So I think more often than not, what I plan doesn't happen as it plans. And I don't think the purpose for planning is that it happens as it plans. But the purpose is for you to have a certain clarity so that you know when something is not there, you know how to make that happen. Yeah, I'm going to quickly move on, and we can, if there are some unanswered questions, we can come back. Yeah, and I'm going to talk a little bit about regularity of that. So we'll move on to the next part, which is about habit. Again, I love Callan and Hobbes, and I think it's a very, while it looks like a fun cartoon, I think it's also a very deep cartoon that sometimes we really like doing an activity, and then we suddenly think that, oh, but why am I not doing it regularly? Like we may have really enjoyed a weekend where we watched a movie and read something, and then we really think, oh, why am I not doing it regularly? Just because we think of something, it doesn't become a habit. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about different habits that can be helpful. I think a big realization I had about habits is, in the short term, the reward is about doing it. It's only the medium term that you feel like you're happy that you've done it. I'm going to ask you to think back about change, where Calvin and Hobbes says on the daily, it doesn't look like anything is different. But over a period of time, you actually feel like something big has changed. So I've realized that while I've said things like, oh, I want to have a habit of journaling, I realize on a daily basis, which is at about 9 o'clock, when I've already been awake for some 14, 15 hours, handled a few tantrums, handled some difficulties at work, preparing for something tomorrow, I'm so tired. And at 9 o'clock in the night, I'm not going to be thinking about, oh, journaling is a great habit. I think what I'm going to think about is I actually want to just go sleep. So that made me think about, so what am I going to do which makes the doing of the habit very rewarding? So not just the habit, but I'm going to break down the habit into what actions do I want to see myself do for this habit to come alive. And again, I think the 3 sort of questions that I ask myself, and I'm sharing this as a tool with you as well, is what is the habit? What can you tag it to? So all of us will have some habits, and I'm a very largely like not at all a disciplined person, a very impulsive person. Like while I know today evening I plan for these 3 or 4 different things, if I suddenly feel like doing a piece of art, or if a friend is calling and I feel like she needs, like we need to talk to each other, I'm the first person to do that. I'm a very impulsive person. But despite that, when I sat and made a list, I saw that there are some very regular habits that I do. Whether it's brushing, whether it's always putting my clothes in the washing machine. So right from small things like that, if you identify what are some habits that you already are doing, and tagging a new habit to it is really helpful. There's a very beautiful book called Power of Habits, where the author talks a lot about how tagging a new habit to an existing habit is really helpful. So I can never go to sleep without drinking water. Like the last thing I do every day is drink water, and I sit for a few minutes, drink water, and go to sleep. And that's been like a sort of a childhood habit that I do. And tagging the habit of opening my journal and sitting with it for a few minutes before drinking water made it very easy for me to at least remember to pick up my journal. And then over a period of time, I knew I was using my journal every night, and slowly writing in my journal has become a habit. And then just the third question is, what is a cluster it belongs to? I think what I saw when I was consistently failing at building a habit, I realized often a lot of us try to build a one-off habit, whether it's a reading habit, whether it's a habit of packing lunch, whether it's trying to go walking every day. It's often one habit that we're trying to build. What I've found useful is saying, what if for every morning, evening, and night, I block off a little bit of time as saying every day for half an hour, I'm going to do this. And any new habit I want to build, I try and cluster it to this. Is it a morning habit or an evening habit or a night habit? So to give you an example, this is from my journal. At some point, I was trying to say every day I want to be drinking 4 liters of water, have 2 servings of protein, get 7 hours of sleep, 1 hour of exercise. And so just these bunch of things. But what really helped me is when I said, okay, here are all the things I'm going to do in the morning. Here are all the things that's going to become a part of my night routine. So I'm going to do all of these things in the morning and night. Just really helped me to cluster the habits together. So every day morning, as soon as I get up, I just clean. I don't even have to think about it. As I get up very sleepily, I keep putting things away, books and vessels and everything back. I clean my kitchen counter. It's something I don't even think about. It's something I've done for a long time. So I said, okay, then can I just ensure again my journal is just kept right there on the table. So as I'm cleaning it, I'm picking it up. Similarly, like brushing is something I do every night. So can I tag my journal to that? So this has been really helpful for me to know what's my habit, what am I tagging it to, what's an existing habit that I want to do. And instead of building one habit at a time, can I think of a cluster of habits? And can I say morning is sometimes I'm going to practice building a new habit. And again, I would tie this back to the idea of change, be specific. I would tie this to the idea of energy also. If you know what is your most energetic time is the great time for you to be starting a new habit. As against if I just know that after 8:30 or 9 in the night, I'm so sleepy and tired that I don't want to be starting a new habit then. So it's just useful for you to know and have that awareness about yourself. Just sharing some examples of habits. The top right is my teammate Shivaranjani. Her journal where she's just put down what are the different ways in which she is going to ask for help. And that's been something that she is working on and reaching out. And again, that's a habit that she's trying to build, saying, I want to be asking for help. And what are the different areas in which I'm going to be doing that, whether it's directly in her work, whether it's in her life. And that's an example of that. I think the one below is building a habit of doing a daily plan. So while I had a weekly plan, I would always sort of be very confused about, I was talking to you earlier about how I have to-do list as morning, evening, and night. And I would never find the time for it every day. But then I realized my daughter spends some time playing every morning. And so I tagged this habit to her habit. So anyway, I had to sit with her when she was playing. So every day her playtime started with her doing some playtime and me sitting and saying, here's my daily planning time. And that was really helpful because no matter what, she was getting her playing time. And this gave me that 5 minutes for me to sit down and write down what my plan is. So sometimes tagging your habit to somebody else's habit. So somebody else in your home may read the newspaper every single day. So saying, I'm going to be sitting with this person when they're reading the newspaper and doing this habit that I want to be pursuing. It is really helpful. Or some people I've worked with, some of the teachers I've worked with have spoken about how they want to get off phone. They don't want to be so much on social media. And I think just creating habits like I'm going to leave the phone in the hall and not take it to my room where I'm sleeping is a very easy way of tagging to an existing. You anyway have to walk from the hall to the room. So can I leave my phone there? So you can start to think creatively about what's the habit and how am I going to build that change. I think coming to the last thing, which is reflection, and it's really my favorite. I think if there's one thing I've worked with everybody in the past 10 years, I think it's building that sort of reflection. As you're designing all of these new systems for yourself, the only thing that will help you be creative and make it fun is for you to sit back and reflect. And again, the questions I will leave you with is, when do you reflect? How often do you reflect? What will I reflect upon? Where? And how can I own it or make it fun? So I'll take you through my answers for these. I think I try and do this in the mornings. I don't do it during the day, because sometimes I feel the highs and lows of the day affects my reflections. So let's say I've had a really good classroom observation. I come back and then I write very positive things in my journal. Whereas if it's in the morning, I find myself fairly unbiased. What will I reflect upon depends really on what are some priorities that I have, or what are some goals that I have for the month. I have this very favorite spot of mine in the campus. We live in a school campus, so there's a very beautiful space that I like to go and sit and reflect. And that's been really helpful to have one space, whether it could be your balcony, could be your favorite sofa, or just like some spot in the house where you are sitting down with your phone app, or just like a book where you are spending that time and thinking a lot about how can you make it fun. I've had some fellows who've made audio notes, some of them who've used apps. So I think it's really thinking a lot about how are you going to reflect and what's helpful for you. The picture below is a picture from my journal where for a month I tried to write this down at the end of every week. That was quite helpful for me. This is for this month. I think just this Sunday, this May 31st, I'm going to sit and put down how many runs have I done, how many books have I read, how many times I've meditated, movies, try and think about what are my highs, lows, what are my big wins, and thinking about what's going to happen in June, which comes back to a question that was asked earlier, is how do I bring it all together? Again, I think there are different ways of doing it. For me, I start every year with one word of the year that I want to be true for the rest of the year. That really helps me. And I would really encourage, it's a great time. You have 6 more months this year, trying to pick one word of the year that will help ground the rest of your year in that word. And for the past 2 to 3 years, it's been very helpful for me to have a journal. It's really just a plain notebook, which I carry, which is divided into 12 for one set of few pages for every month. And that's really helpful for me to think about my time and energy. That's helped me bring everything together. I will leave you with just a few things I've learned through me trying to manage myself and time. And it's certainly a struggle. But I think I've just realized it's a journey, it's not a destination. There's never going to be one time where I'm going to say, yeah, now I've figured everything out. Despite being fairly organized, just having a child, threw all of that out of the window. And it's very beautiful to also find my own rhythm and let systems sort of fall back in place. And every 3 months, like I feel like our work demands something very different of us. Every few months, our daughter demands something very different of us. And I think hence it's been a journey. I think the biggest thing I've had in working, coaching teachers, working with people is you'll have to find out what works for you. Possibly some ideas from this webinar can help you start, but it's a work that you do with yourself to see like what are some things that really work for me. A really big thing is having a lot of fun along the way, especially for those of you wondering, isn't this like overwhelming? If something doesn't happen according to the plan, aren't you frustrated? And I think it's okay to be frustrated. I think I sometimes have those days where I'm like, shit, nothing is working. I am trying so much, but nothing is working. But I think I get back to it because it's fun. And I spoke a little bit about it earlier. The purpose of the plan, I think, is to be flexible. It's very much like, I think for me in my teaching days, I knew that when I knew what I wanted to teach very well, even if some plans went here and there, I was very confident about being able to deliver that lesson. And I think that's very true of the purpose of planning itself. I don't think purpose to plan is for you something to happen. I think it's to help you be flexible. These are some books. These are 2 books, actually, The One Thing and Power of Habits, that's deeply influenced me about how I think about time and energy. And like I shared earlier, I use the NRC app regularly. That's possibly the only app that I use. I am not much of a technology person, but if that works for you, then that's great. Particularly at a time where everybody's a lot more on these Zoom calls and technology, maybe it's also refreshing to pick up a notebook and a pen and sort of create your own journal and help yourself figure this out. Tasks is a great way to start organizing your task as well. These are a couple of apps if you're interested. I recognize this has been like a very one-way sort of a conversation, but all of you all have participated wonderfully on the chat box, and we could possibly take some questions as well right now. But I just really love to hear from you guys, so you can write to me. You can also follow the work that we do at Kanavu, and I hope like we can sort of form a small community that wants to say journal or do something with our time. We can definitely figure that out. So if you do have any thoughts, questions, you can please feel free to write to me or connect to me on social media as well. Yeah, so can possibly open out for some questions and thoughts, Ellie?
Yes, Nisha, miss, we have a list of questions both from the FB chat and this chat. I'll start with the first question. How do we set boundaries effectively between personal life and professional life, especially during this lockdown period? Like any suggestions on that?
I think it's a great question. And I think the first question I would ask is, do you want that boundary? And if you want that boundary, can you again describe it for yourself? Does it look like I want to be spending 10 hours at work and 5 hours with my family? I think just trying to be very concrete about what you want that boundary to be is very helpful. And something I've learned about boundaries is our ability to say no first to ourselves. Can I say no to a Zoom meeting? And can I say that that's because I need to be spending this kind of time with my family? Am I first okay with that? And am I getting used to saying no to some things? It's helpful. Personally, for me, it's given me immense peace of mind to not think of work and life as very different things. I think for me to acknowledge that work, art, children, all of these are parts of my life that's important. And everything needs some time and energy devoted to it, has been a very helpful perspective for me to both see work as one part of the pie. It currently still like I work crazy number of hours. If somebody were to evaluate my life on work-life balance, they would score me quite poorly on that. But I think it really helps me to see it as one holistic piece. And hence, I think a great question to ask ourselves is, what does that look like? Do we need it? It's been a lot of relief for me to figure out for myself that I don't want it. Like, I think that doesn't exist and I don't want it, so I'm not chasing it, has given me a lot of relief. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Miss. Next question. So how to make out a schedule for self if one loves to jump to new tasks whenever new thoughts come to my mind? If for that kind of a person, how do we make a plan?
Yeah. So whoever that is, I think I'm also that kind of a person. I absolutely get a lot of energy from running and chasing ideas. That's why I think one thing that's been super helpful is mega to-dos. I think I just write down that idea and I sort of wait to see if it keeps coming back to me. Do I really want to do it? And then I get to it. So I think that's one thing that's been really helpful. I think the second is, again, if I have an overall plan for the week, I know that 3 hours is going away in something else. I know this day I can make up for it by doing this. So I think just having an overall plan is helpful. I think there's a lot of strength to being that kind of a person. And hence having a plan will allow you to do that. And something that was helpful for me was one part of my journal had color coded. So I would say if everything that, anything new that came up would be a color red. Anything new that I wanted to do and edit will be a color blue. And I just kept coloring every day to say, what's the proportion of my time I'm spending on this? And it's a very nice visual and pleasing way for me to see that, oh, I did chase a few ideas that I wanted to, and the week turned out fine. Just writing it down, I think, has been helpful for me. Yeah.
One question. So what activities help you re-energize after a very long day of work? So what do you do to energize yourself?
I think one is I don't wait for at the end of the day. for me to energize myself. That's been a huge shift in how I look at my time. I think I look at different little things through the day that really helps me to keep myself energized. And I think I've learned this a lot from both my baby and my dog. They don't wait for end of the day for something good. Through the day, they keep wanting good things for themselves. And I think that's true of me as well. So like I really look forward to like a bit of quiet time and coffee in the morning. Like I said, but if there's a 15-minute gap between meetings, I actually pick up my wool and crochet thread and I do 10-15 minutes of crochet and then I get back to a meeting. So once my things are set up, so sometimes I leave the paint and easel just there so that in between something I can go paint for a bit and come back. So I think I've figured out some ways in which I keep energizing myself through the day so that I'm not waiting for end of the day for me to sort of feel good. I think me being a very impulsive and distracted person is also helpful. So I think I have a variety of hobbies and I think I like picking up something or the other. Just picking up the phone and speaking to somebody or chatting with some people is also very energizing. Music is very energizing. But it's been very helpful to do it at different times in the day so that I'm not waiting for me to feel tired for me to do something good for myself. Because the goal should also be that I should have good energy through the day. I shouldn't need to tire myself out.
Makes sense, makes sense. Another question. So doesn't like planning on this scale reduce the flexibility of spending a day? Like what if your mind and body wants to do something else from the list you have made?
Perfect. So we do that. So even with this meal plan, so like I said, there are 4 of us at home, or even when my husband and I used to live together I mean, it was just the both of us. On one of days, we just felt like we didn't want to eat this, we wouldn't. I think about 80% of the days we stick to this schedule. 20% of the days we say, no, we want to do something else, and that's perfectly okay. This is very helpful on a day where you don't want to be thinking about it. You don't have to think about it. Something is already available. Somebody's already thought about it, and you know something is available for you to make that. This planning has absolutely allowed me to be super flexible, and it's not at all possible for me to stick through all of this with 2 children and a full-time entrepreneurial venture if I wanted to be sticking to my schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Another question is how to stick to the task that we have made if you just have a mind that is so fickle. So any tips on like sticking to the plan that we have made?
Sure. I think just reflection is helpful. If you know, if you find yourself that your mind is asking you to do something else, possibly just seeing if over a period of time, is there a certain task that you don't enjoy? Is that a reason why you want to be doing something else? Then asking yourself, should you even be doing this task? Or is this something that can be delegated? Is this something you need more help doing? Or if, for me, just working with somebody is really helpful. I often find myself being a little fickle-minded when I don't want to do something or when something is very difficult. I think just finding time with someone saying, hey, you work on your stuff, I'm going to work on my stuff, but we're going to sit together and do something. And currently that can even look like finding your online buddy. But really asking yourself why you feel like you don't want to do that thing. And understanding that. And then again, saying sometimes I leave my most difficult things for the next day morning. So if I feel like I'm getting very stuck, I don't really want to do this thing. I think the first thing in the morning, I'm not going to do my journal. I'm not going to cook or anything. I'm going to get up, pick up my laptop and go do this work first and then get to the other things because that's my sort of very high energy time. That really helps me to come back to that task with some energy.
It's a question on reflection. How do we reflect better? Like what questions can we ask ourselves when we reflect? Some examples of questions.
Yeah. I think for me, reflection has been very helpful to map it to my actions. For me to say, okay, what are all the things that I want to be reflecting about? And then thinking about what helped me with it, what is holding me back from it. Often I used to really keep thinking, I'm not disciplined, I am very indecisive, that's why I'm not really sticking to anything. But I really when I wrote down over a period of time, I realized there were so many factors contributing to why something was not happening. So I think reflection based on something very concrete, like here's what I want to get done. Here are the things that helped me. Here are the things that didn't help me, is a good thing. I really think the only way to get better at reflection is by reflecting. I think over a period of time, just consistently trying different things. Consistent doesn't mean whether I like it or not, I'm going to sit with a book at 6 a.m. every morning, but really trying different things, trying a variety of things and saying, hey, this worked for me, and I'm going to continue doing this is helpful. Yeah.
Makes sense, miss. One more thing. Habit is about consistency. So how do you build that? Any tips on building a habit?
Sure. I think this tracking is a great way to help yourself be consistent. Again, tracking not from a punitive, not from saying, oh, if you didn't do it 3 times, then it's a problem. But can you track and then go back and think about, oh, what are the days this has not happened? And if it's not happened, why has it not happened? Okay, I'm not motivated to do this. Can I find out more? I think a combination of tracking and reflection really helps. Consistency is definitely something I struggle with, even with some old habits, or sometimes something I start new and I'm able to be super consistent with it. And I think I don't feel any pressure. The only pressure I feel is for me to know why about this. Can I know why this is difficult and know why this is not difficult? Again, for a lot of people, consistency can be achieved when they are in a group doing something. I think I'm a part of a group where different people are exercising, and then it's helpful for me to see that so many people are doing so many different things, even though I'm not connected to anybody. Just that for me is very inspiring, and that's something which I'm really enjoying and saying, okay, after lockdown as well, I'm going to continue to be a part of this group because it's helpful. It's helping me be consistent. And then when you actually look at it, nobody in that group is consistency is not every day. But consistency is I'm able to do it at a reasonably okay place. So consistency, I think, needs a lot of inspiration, regularity, and also being okay with being inconsistent is almost the only way to be consistent. Like I was saying, I used to be that person who, if until Wednesday I'm not exercising, I'll just be like, chalo, by Monday I'll start. Or if it's 21st, 22nd, I'll be like, it's okay, I'll start from 1st of the next month. But just sometimes getting that message on that group of somebody saying, I finished my walk for today. I'm like, oh, like I can also do this. And then I know I'm consistent for the next 5-6 days. So yeah, a lot of data and reflection is helpful for consistency. Yeah.
So like the part where you said a little bit of inconsistency is okay. I think we should listen to our body and mind when the body is saying like, it's okay. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
There's another question, miss. Is there an ideal time guide, like 7 hours of sleep, 1 hour of exercise, 8 hours of work? Any ideal time guide like that?
I mean, there's a lot available online. I use some of it as a guide. My coach for my physical exercises also says 7 hours of sleep is good. And at least 30 minutes of exercise 4 to 5 times a week is good for physical well-being and physical health. I think those two are the only things that I try to live by. There is so much, again, lots of information available online about here's how you should be spending your time. But I think for me, it really comes down to what's your time, what's your situation. And again, just for me, being a parent has taught me that we survived 1 year with just 3-4 hours of sleep and we did completely fine. It's okay because we were trying to respond to a certain situation. And hence, I think I find it very difficult to prescribe saying, here's what is helpful. But largely, if you should be able to listen to your body and say, if your body is asking for more sleep, less sleep, just that awareness, I think, is helpful. Yeah.
That's an interesting question. Can you tell us a little bit more about Kanavu? You said in the beginning, like, what is it?
Yeah. So Kanavu means dreams in Tamil. So Gautam, my husband, and I, we met each other at Teach for India Fellowship, and we got married. We moved to Chennai, and we worked with urban education for 7 years. And we always felt like 70% of India gets educated in rural. And if we are serious about education as such, we should like work in rural India. We had an opportunity to move to rural Kadalur. Kadalur is a small town in Tamil Nadu, and we live in a village called Kannarapettai. And the both of us moved in here in 2017, and we were joined by two other Teach for India alumni, Shivaranjani and Dravina, in 2018. So we're a small team of 4 of us. Here we work with 5 affordable private schools. We serve 1,200 children, 55 teachers and 5 school leaders. We work with them directly to really explore the idea of how circumstance must not dictate the destiny of a child. Every child should have access to quality education, and it's definitely possible. We work with a phenomenally wonderful set of teachers who are from the villages and communities themselves, but are really striving to deliver like world-class quality education. So that's broadly the work that we do here. We also work with 10 mothers, women from the communities in a very remote village. None of them are educated. So they're all now women entrepreneurs. They're stitching bags. They make cotton cloth bags. So that's an entrepreneurial venture that's running by the side. It's, in fact, just 2 days ago, we celebrated our 3rd anniversary of moving in here and 2nd anniversary of Kanavu. So we're a very young organization. It's very similar to my child. I think our organization also has its own demands. It is quite like a baby. We have to be very hands-on with it. Very exciting work. We've been immensely supported by lots of teachers and educators. We keep hosting camps. Elizabeth has also come and trained our teachers. So hopefully once all of this lockdown and everything is over, some of you all can also visit us and just continue to work with our teachers. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Another question connected to the webinar. For a starter who has never scheduled anything, like so far, someone who's never worked on a plan, never created a plan, how should I move about with it? Like, how do I start? Any starting tips?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just getting started with answering the time versus energy questions that I put out at first, and I'll share the PPT as well. That's a great starting point. And identifying what change you want to be seeing. So identifying what is your goal actually. Is it just to be able to plan? Is it to be able to achieve something by end of the week? And I've seen with a lot of fellows, with a lot of teachers that we work with as well, a week is a good time to say, okay, between Monday and next Sunday, here are some of the things I want to be working on. And again, just figuring out what's the way that works for you. Is it an app? Is it, I'm going to make a poster and put it out. I'm going to start planning my week. And that's a great starting point. And then if you come back at the end of the week to reflect, to see what's worked, what's not worked, that will give you a lot of information to work with. And I also think there is nobody who doesn't plan. I feel like everybody is planning all the time. And everybody is changing all the time. This is only just putting it down on paper or on an app, if you want to, that makes it far more intentional. And I really think there's a certain power with writing something down. I've seen that even a very difficult thing, if I write it down, I'm able to break it down in my head. And sometimes I feel problems get solved because something very simple struck me when I tried to write it down. And hence I think there's some power in being able to write down your thoughts. Yeah.
Perfect. There's one question. Okay. So how about interventions from family or other people who interrupt a day, which is already planned, which I can imagine definitely happens in your life. How do you balance when that happens? Like, what do you do?
Yeah. I think one is, I shared a little bit about that in the ecosystem. I think definitely investing your family in this is important. So can your family also see that you're trying to work on some things, and can they support you in some ways? And I have a very supportive ecosystem always. I've always had a very supportive ecosystem where people understand that, let's say, it's a give and take. I also feel like I also have to be flexible. My ecosystem also will have to understand. But that said, I think it's a balance between sometimes being able to say, okay, this is important for this family, I'm going to do this now. Or sometimes being able to draw that boundary and saying a firm no. But I think something that's helped me is I always find another way to make that thing happen. Wonder why they're interrupting, and then seeing if there's another way. Can I sort of problem solve for it? Sometimes when I'm working out of my mother's place and I'm constantly on calls, she feels like I'm not spending time with her at all. So although I'm at her place, I haven't spent, which I assume for a lot of you all who are living with family now during lockdown, that's sort of a big thing. You're always on phone, you're always on a webinar, you're not talking to me. Something that's been really helpful is just saying, what is that quality time that I want to be spending with family. And once I've done that, that also helps me to feel not guilty about it. Or sometimes I know that I am going to be sitting for dinner with my family. And hence, even through the day, if I'm saying I'm not available, it's okay, because that 1 hour is going to be sort of a time that I'm spending with my daughter. So I think it's a very tricky thing for sure. We should have an ecosystem that understands this, and our own ability to say no is also very helpful. It demonstrates a certain ownership over your time for sure. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Miss. Now it's a very technical question.
Yeah.
What do you mean by screen time and active time? It was there in your slide. So what's the difference between screen time and active time?
Yeah. So I think screen time, I think of screen time as when I'm just consuming something, where I'm like watching something, reading something, just like going over Insta. Active time is, let's say I blog. So when I'm blogging, or when I'm prepared, I'm still on a laptop and I'm still looking at, so physically it's still screen time, but I'm actively creating some content. So if I was, say, part of this webinar, I would think of that as screen time. But if I am actively creating content in this, I would think of this as my active time. It's just for me to be aware of how many hours am I spending in front of the screen, and how much of it is passive and how much of it is active. Yeah.
Perfect. We have just 3 more minutes. I think we'll take one more question, which is, I think, a good summary of this entire webinar. What have you learned about yourself through this lockdown? That's one question.
I think like I shared before, we moved to rural India 3 years back, and it massively simplified our lives. And I used to think, even in Chennai, which is an urban city, we lived a pretty, we were not so high, we wouldn't eat out so much, we wouldn't necessarily Swiggy so much. And sustainability was sort of some thought we had. And I think moving here, our life has simplified so much. We live in a campus. There's nobody else on campus other than us. Once everybody's moved out of school. So it almost feels like we've been preparing for 3 years for this quarantine. So many things are not different for us. Like we have to always stock up, or we've always been sort of removed. I can't randomly go meet family. So I think so much is not very different for us. If you largely think of at rural India. Something I learned about myself, hence, was how when the choice of you can go meet your people whenever you want is removed from me, I felt very constrained. So it's not like I live about 4.5 hours away from my mother's place, from my family. And there have been times when for 5 weeks, 6 weeks, we haven't been able to travel to Chennai because work has been busy. But I think just the fact that there was choice gave me a lot of hope. And just currently now knowing that if I have to go, even just go meet my mother, I can't do that. And to go meet my father, I need a pass. And to think that so many millions of people in this country are going through that and choosing to walk home, and so many difficult things are happening, is leaving me feeling so difficult about choice. I think I learned a lot that I don't thrive very well in an environment where there is no choice. Even if I don't exercise the choice, I need to have the choice. Yeah.
Choice. Yeah. So yeah. It's being under our control. We make the choice of going or not going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Miss. I guess exactly like 4:30. We would like to thank you for being generous with your time and expertise and all the wonderful pictures of your journals. It's like very, very inspiring. I request you to quickly share what your thoughts are about the webinar today. What do you think about gently this webinar?
Sure. I was telling Elizabeth and a couple of others, so I was very nervous about this because I used to be a primary school teacher, and through all the trainings and sessions that I do, I really encourage a lot of interactive participation. So webinars have always been a little nervous, but this is really great at all points. Just getting a lot of thoughts on the chat box was really helpful, and just a lot of questions made it feel very interactive. So thank you so much for your participation. And just two sort of closing thoughts for me. I think one is a lot of times when people hear me talk about the planning, they almost feel like it's a very robotic, boring life. So I can assure you that it's not. I think it's a lot of fun. to be able to do this and to do your thing. So I hope some of you all are feeling, or all of you all are feeling inspired to give this a shot. And I think the other is, I was talking a little bit about your ecosystem. We all need ecosystem to get this going. So please feel free to access me as part of your ecosystem. Please write to me with your thoughts, and I hope this participation can continue beyond this webinar as well.
Thank you so much. Lovely.
Very good
Yeah.
session.
Thank you.
We can also like visit Kanavu whenever possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, participants. Thank you, all of you. Our next
Thank you
webinar is
so
scheduled to
much.
take place on June 1st, which is a lively conversation between Anu Aga, the retired chairperson for Max Limited, and Shaheen Mistry, CEO of TFI, highlighting the importance of compassion in today's world. So please look out for Firki emails, your inbox for information about this. Before you leave, please also take some time to fill the feedback form on your learning experience on our webinar today. You can see that on the chat box. Thank you so much. And again, if you want to reach out to speaker Nisha here, you can write to her at nisha.asifa@gmail.com. You can see all these information in the chat box. You can follow Kanav's work on Facebook at Come to Kanarpit, Instagram and Twitter account handles. It will be mentioned in the chat box right now. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great evening. Thank you so much, Nisha.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.